And it was about learning to love myself and learning myself, my self-worth, and learning to be okay, with people, like saying bad things, and just like it took so much work. I mean, there was times I didn't think it was even possible because how deep rooted my lack of self-worth was.
Right. Right.
But I have done so much work so that I could do this, and that's why I fell to my knees crying when I got that news, because
Wow.
that meant that I could do this, that I
Yeah.
could actually do that. And it's been incredible, and I'm so proud of myself.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Master Plant Talk. As always, I am your host, Tyler Hurst of Microdose Yoga, and I am here with Jennifer Murphey, who is in the midst of a lawsuit against a host of government agencies. Jennifer, who are you and what makes you come alive?
Well, I'm a high dimensional being who loves magic, and I most of the work that I do is in the higher dimensions, in the energetic fields, and my job, my goal, I guess, is to try to translate that here into the 3D. And what makes me come alive is doing that, is I love to explore the higher dimensions and do work in there. And I love to see people's magic. I have a very strong capacity to see and to think and to map things from a very high dimension. And so I'm just always taking in information. And what makes me come alive is learning other people's magic. I love to witness humans and energies and learn about them, because all of us have such a unique blueprint and unique coding that no one else has. And so it takes a very open mind to be able to witness that from an open standpoint and actually learn that unique magic. So that's what makes me come alive, is just to witness people and learn who they are. It helps me learn, and I love it.
That is fantastic. So we first met a couple of years ago. We met in person. We were part of a panel for Stuart Preston's book on grief. He was talking about how psychedelics helped him process some of his grief. And I believe you were either starting or you were in process of filing a lawsuit against the multiple government agencies about plant medicine use. I know there's been some developments in the case. Could you talk a little bit about what that lawsuit is about, where you're at? Just sort of give us your intro and an update as to what is going on with all of
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. So I'm an attorney, and I started down the plant medicine path and the just self-discovery path, and about a little over 4 years ago. And I quit my job. I just wasn't happy, and I knew I wanted to do something big for people. I became an attorney because I wanted to be a voice for suppressed voices. It's something that's been in my heart ever since I was a little kid. And I've been around my whole life those, who have been diagnosed with mental health conditions and addicts. And that's just something, it's very close to my heart. And I have noticed from a young age how the system is just such a failure. It fails people, it hurts people. There's really no human in the system. Like, to me, that's the core of everything. There's nothing about humans and recognizing the unique human experience. I've always wanted to do something big, and I went to law school with the idea that I wanted to do something big. And something that really fascinated me in law school was just how much a lawsuit can change things. It can change things on a more significant level than legislation, than, policy changes, because you have a lawsuit, and once the United States Supreme Court, or, another high court says, makes their decision on that lawsuit, that can change everything. It's one of the most effective ways to essentially dismantle a system.
it. Okay. Okay. So I have a quick question about that. So you're saying that, I mean, even beyond like high-powered lobbying, a lawsuit has more power to affect change than even like a well-funded corporate lobby group that can go and sit in legislative buildings and talk people's ears off, because I'm assuming there's so much inherent power in the courts. But yeah, so a lawsuit is, I mean, more powerful than even money at times.
Well,
At times. Not every time. I mean, obviously it takes money to get to where you're going, but because of our legal system, a lawsuit can really make change.
it absolutely can. And, I'm kind of learning the hard way that money can also it infiltrate the courts. And
Okay. Okay.
they're not,
Okay.
quite so pure. But yes, it's because, with laws and lobbying and like creating legislation, it's very subjective. It's very vague,
Okay. Okay.
and then it takes the courts to say what a law means.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yes, but it takes someone to bring it to the courts for the courts to then say, okay, this law means this. And there's so much analysis that can go into that, like, okay, what did the people who drafted the bill, what were their intention? Like they even go as deep as that. Like, what did they mean when they wrote this sentence? And they decide.
Yeah.
So the courts, they're the judges of what gets to go and what doesn't get to go. And so
Right.
things can
Right.
go
That makes
on
sense.
and yeah, for a while. But once the courts, the judge casts judgments on what is right and what it cannot continue, that's significant. So
Okay.
yes. So yeah, that always fascinated me. And yeah, I've always, my whole life, I'm like, go big or go home. I was the worst troublemaker in high school because like if someone's going to have 5 write-ups, oh, I'm going to have 100. I like to do things big. And so yeah, so then after law school, I went and I found a position where I was able to do mental health care or mental health law, disability law, and elder law. And that was everything I wanted to do, and it was all in one law firm. So that was amazing. I love advocating for individuals. And then I went into employment law, plaintiffs employment law. So I represented employees, with discrimination, wage claims, whatever. And it always, like, the thing that I really enjoyed about that was the human side of that. Most people just want to be heard and not just be put into the system. And especially with employment law, I had to really talk to the clients before they, decided to commit to suing their employer, because it was going to be a very emotional ordeal where their name was going to be dragged through the mud. And sometimes, more times than not, actually, the stress of the lawsuit is more, it's not worth it. Like it
Okay.
outweighs
Yeah.
the
Right.
feeling
Right.
of,
Right. Right.
I'm doing something for somebody. So it's always been humans first. And, like I love learning humans and the psychology of it. And then, yeah, I just became unhappy. I was just very unhappy in my life. I went through a lot of, I kind of grew up, like, I started to realize that I had a lot of self-hatred. I did not believe that anything I said had value. I just went through a lot and I just wanted to be happy. So I just kind of dedicated myself to learning how to love myself and to stepping away from anything that just wasn't me, that wasn't, happy, so I could learn my own beliefs and learn my own energy and learn who I was. And so I quit my job. And that was shortly after I had my first ayahuasca ceremony.
Okay.
And I was like,
Could
you
I
know what?
could I establish like just the timeline really quick? How old? What or not? Don't tell me. You don't tell me how old you are. How? What year ish did you graduate law school? Ish.
2017.
Okay, 2017. So then you started working for multiple years, and then you had your first ayahuasca experience in
The beginning of 2021.
2021. Okay, so this is like a 4-year span of work. So you got burned out. I mean, not burned out, but you saw the negativity really quick.
Yeah, I was not a
Okay.
lawyer for that long.
Okay.
I was an
Okay.
older law student. I
Uh-huh.
am in my 40s.
Okay.
And I was an older law student. Like, due to family issues, I delayed law school because my family essentially needed me, and I couldn't step away and take away my energy for what law school would require. But then in my mid 30s, I finally was like, I'm going to do it. But yeah, I wasn't an attorney for long. I worked in food service and everything before that. Didn't really have a lot of savings and retirement, like barely any. So after I started down the plant medicine path, and I'm like, you know what? My happiness is going to come first. And I quit my job. I took a big risk, but it was worth it. It was a huge leap of faith. And I was like, you know what? I don't care if I'm homeless on the streets. I just want to be happy. Like, to me, that's the most important thing. So, because yeah, if you're sitting there, homeless and you have nothing, but you're happy, then that's really all that matters.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Um,
For sure.
so,
Okay,
so
so
then I
it's so
started.
it's yeah, so it's 2021. You have your first ayahuasca experience. You start to, let's say, improve your mental health. right? Or get to know your higher self better, however we want to say that. And you seemingly make a decision to start to what happens after that?
Well, I don't know when the seed for the lawsuit came in, but around that time, like pretty soon in the beginning, it came in. And once I get a seed of something that's like a challenge, I know I'm going to do it. So
All right. All right.
it was, I didn't know how. I didn't know, it took a lot of creativity working up in the ethers. I worked on this, building this seed, growing this seed, a lot during ceremony. I've written a lot of stuff about this lawsuit during ceremony. I've sat with ayahuasca over 60 times, and it's like every time, because I'm a very good investigator of myself. I don't put blame on anybody or anything. It's constant, like, okay, what's holding me back here? What's causing me unhappiness here? What's causing me fear here? And I go in and I work through that. And so I've done that, and I've essentially been in isolation and I'm trying to use the word solitude now rather than isolation, but it is isolation. For
Gotcha.
pretty much 99% of the time of these past 4 years, I'm alone in my home.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, do you live out in the middle of nowhere? Do you live in like a cave? Like, what do you mean by solitude / isolation?
I do live in a cave, and
You
I've
do live in
gone
a cave.
deep into my cave. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
It's varied. I was, in a condo, renting. I've always rented, and then I moved into a travel trailer full time
Okay.
to help with money, because I mean, this is a big financial risk. And right now, I live somewhere where I'm, essentially hidden, and I know that's part of the design of the universe to hide me so I can do what I need to do and for protection. So, but yes, I live in a beautiful land that I know is gifted to me by the universe that allows me to ground. I'm on 5 acres right now and just have the nourishment of Mother Earth, because it's just so necessary for my mental mastery in this journey. So yeah, so the seed started growing for the lawsuit. I just started creating up here, and I had experiences with the medicine that helped me move that forward too. Like, I want to share a story.
Please.
So when the lawsuit was still just a seed, I was in a ceremony. It was just me and two other people, really close friends. And the theme of the weekend was Gaia. And I had a good friend who's, a very strong channel. And she was channeling Gaia and everything. And I'm always right there with all the energy that's happening in the room. And so I was sitting with Gaia, and I felt her. I felt how hard she works, that she's one of the hardest working souls right now, and that she needs us, And I let her, I held her and let her take a nap, let her rest. And then I took it on, and that's how I felt everything she was going through while she was resting and napping in my lap. I could feel everything, and it just gave me so much respect and honor for her. And I asked her, I said, "What can I do for you?" And she said, "The lawsuit." And I was like, "What?" Because this was early on, like where the seed was just, I wasn't even thinking about the lawsuit at the time. Like, it was not even
Yeah,
in
so
the
this is like 3 or 4 years ago, like
yeah,
2021,
this was still in
2022-ish.
2021.
And
This is
so
probably fall.
you're saying Gaia, or you're sorry, in a ceremony focused on Gaia, that you got messages from, I mean, Mother Ayahuasca, whoever you were getting messages from, your higher self, whatever else, that told you it was time to think about a lawsuit. Like, they
Well,
basically told you,
yeah.
wow. Wow.
Gaia told
I
me.
mean,
Gaia told me.
Gaia told you. You just don't think Gaia would say lawsuit. You think Gaia would say conserve the earth, or Gaia would say something like that. But no, okay. Wow.
Yeah, it blew
Okay.
me away
Wow.
when because I was not expecting that. I
Wow.
was like
No.
genuinely asking her, "What can I do for you?" And she said, "The lawsuit."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What? Why? Like, how? How is this going to help you?" And she explained to me. She said what she said is that the United States is essentially the heartbeat of the world, and that by doing that, it will help it'll just trickle out. There wasn't really details. That's just what she explained, that it was the heartbeat of the world, and that it would help. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll do it.
I mean, you're not gonna argue that. I mean, once you hear messages in ceremony, you sort of gotta go. I mean, most of the time, you gotta go with them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know I trust what I get when
Yeah.
I trust
Yeah.
myself. So the end of 2021, I was already researching. I was already trying to create ways of how can I do this? Like we all know, most of us know it's wrong. There's the war on drugs and everything, it's harmful. I had to really learn the energy of it and see, what all was happening. And I was able to get to like the core of it, like back to the beginning of creation and everything. And I've purged for the DEA and everything. I've done a lot of work up there, and I had to essentially figure out, okay, now let me look at the laws, look at the Constitution, let me do research. And I researched like
Okay.
decades of paperwork, of documents,
Uh-huh.
related to drug scheduling. And this includes the World Health Organization, because I'm challenging not just the Controlled Substances Act, but the two international treaties whereby the World Health Organization and other UN entities decide how things are scheduled and then essentially command the countries who are a part of those treaties to follow those scheduling regimes. I researched so much, and I was trying to figure out, how do I do this? I was working with a lot of with some people that were running ibogaine clinics in Mexico, and I was like, okay, I'm around a lot of addicts in recovery, and I could potentially do like a class action somehow, but I don't really know what I'm doing. That would have required me to essentially be responsible for them. And I don't take that lightly. These are other people's lives. And also it would have asked to put them on the line,
Right.
because
Yeah.
in order to have standing, to bring a lawsuit, you have to have an injury. And that injury can either come from, okay, I've been arrested for under the Controlled Substances Act for possessing, substances that they don't want us to possess. Or there's another way you can do it by saying it's called like pre-enforcement standing. And essentially it's admitting I break the law, but this law is unconstitutional. And because there's this unconstitutional law, I have this fear that I'm going to be prosecuted for doing something that I should be allowed to do. And it's that fear that is the injury. Like I have to constantly be looking over my shoulder.
That's pretty good. That's
Yeah.
real good. Good
Yeah,
work.
it's like anyone, thank you for recognizing that. Like anyone could have done this, and I tried contacting law firms, I tried doing all these things, and no one would
Yeah.
respond, no one would do it,
Yeah.
no one would help me. And I was like, you know what? I'm blessed with a brilliant mind, and I can take a lot of information and I can create stuff, and I know I can write this and I can form this in there. I'm not scared. So I did the research and everything, figured out how I could have standing, how I was going to do this, what claims I could do. And essentially, for the standing part, I admitted to, I put in there, I possess, use, and grow. I covered cannabis, cocoa leaves, ayahuasca, iboga, and psilocybin mushrooms. And so I had to put that in there. I possess this, I use this, I grow this, and or grow those items. And I had to admit to all those so that way I could also bring in the international treaties,
Right.
because
Right.
they schedule certain, like there's one treaty that does narcotics, which would cover the cannabis and the cocoa leaves. So I had to admit to those if I wanted to challenge that treaty. And the other treaty has to do with psychotropic substances. So then I had to admit to ayahuasca, psilocybin mushrooms, and iboga in order to challenge that treaty. And so I put that all out there and said, I do these things. I plan to continue to do these things. And because of
Wow.
that, I face a credible threat of prosecution. So therefore, I have
Right.
an injury. I have standing. That's what I did. And then I had to get creative with the claims. Like, I know this is wrong, but how is it wrong? And I created some very strong claims, which I can go into later. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna be a lot.
Yeah. 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 No, I get it. So, I do have a quick question, just based on my own personal experience. Is I know that we're taught growing up. I don't know if you were a dare kid. I know I was a dare kid, and about all the anti-drug messaging that we get growing up and all that type of stuff. Is that I recently had coca leaves for the first time in my life. I had them when I was in Peru in September last year. I was shocked at how non-drug like they were. Just coca leaves in themselves. They were like a cleaner, less frustrating version of caffeine that just sort of like gave you sort of took the edge off your tiredness, but didn't get you high. It didn't anything else. I mean, I obviously know they get turned into cocaine. I've never actually had cocaine, but coca leaves are actually like really nice. Like I really enjoyed using them when I was down there, and I didn't have any withdrawal symptoms when I came back. Have you noticed, or did any of those, was any of that sort of realization that when you finally took these drugs that we were told were dangerous and are going to hurt us or whatever else, or you couldn't have them, did you realize like, oh my God, this stuff is actually maybe not, I don't want to say good for you because that's the judgment thing, but they were just nowhere near what you expected them to be? Or I
Well,
should say plants or medicines or whatever else. Yeah.
well, I did a lot of substances as a teenager, a lot.
Okay. Okay. So you already had, okay. So you, all right, never mind. You already had all that experience then. So, okay. All right. Okay.
Yes. I mean, of course, it was
So good
different
for you.
then. It was very
Good for you.
different then, but I never really had that in me that they're bad, stay away from it. It's not how I grew up. I've had,
You just skipped that completely.
yeah. I mean, I
Good for
won
you.
second
Good
place
for
in the
you.
Dare contest to create a poster, like in like
Yeah.
fifth grade or something,
Yeah.
like
Okay.
or fourth
Okay.
grade.
Good for
But
you.
yeah, it was good, like just create a poster.
Good for
But
you.
yeah, I've
Okay.
always been pretty sovereign with that.
Okay. So basically you're using your creativity and your understanding to create an injury that stemmed from the fear of using and possessing and growing these what we know as plant medicines. We know as not as like I mean we're not growing party drugs. And even if we were,
Doesn't matter.
what are you gonna do about it? Yeah, what are you gonna do?
Doesn't
Okay.
matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's another reason why this lawsuit is, it truly is the most significant lawsuit in history to end the war on
Right.
drugs. No one
Right.
has ever dissected it the way I have, and no one has ever brought a like wholesale claim against the entire thing. The only thing that's ever been done before is maybe someone might say this has been scheduled improperly, like cannabis has been scheduled improperly, or this, has been, but no one's ever done this. I'm not sure why. Like when I was doing the research, it blew me away how obvious the unlawful actions by the government were. I mean, it is
Okay.
just so obvious. And I was
Okay.
like, how has no one done this before? Even talking to other attorneys, like they don't get it. There's a lot of programming in societies, like something that made it where we are okay with this that has been going on for over 55 years. And it blows my mind that we're okay with this. But I found I think there's a lot of other attorneys that are scared. I put my career on the line. I put everything on
Yeah.
the line to do
Yeah.
this. My safety, everything. And I couldn't find anybody to be able to kind of think outside of the box to and have that passion and that drive to, yes, I truly want to make change. It's like, okay, is there money in it? We have to follow the system because I'm not following the conformed, system. I'm blowing it all out of the water. So yeah, I had to do it by myself. And I made that decision. It was an honor to make that decision. It was like, you know what? If in my lifetime, if I can sue the United States, like, why not? I'm gonna do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, how amazing is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Huh. So now you're in, let's say, is it 2022 now? You have the seed, you start
Yeah.
constructing your argument. What goes into that? What goes into the construction of an argument? Like, how are you building that?
That was quite a creative process. Quite a creative process. And it really confirmed to me of why I went into law, because law, it's an art. It can be such an art, but it's like mental magic. Like if you can just take things, information, and be so creative with it and to form it into something that now it is a concept. It's like you're creating brand new intellectual concepts. And then now it's my job to like sell that essentially to the
Right.
courts at least.
Right.
Um, and it's such a unique concept that I created that I've been finding it like people just don't get it. They don't. I really don't know. Maybe like a couple people that knows about this that actually truly understand. Even attorneys when they read it don't get it. Um, and so that is my challenge because even the courts they just don't get it. It's such a new way of thinking. Um, so so my favorite claim, I guess I'll go into the claims. Um, well, so I filed, so what I did is the early 2022, kind of like spring of 2022, I had already done, I'd done so much mentally, I guess, energetically that I was ready to start producing on the computer. And so I kind of locked myself away in my room, which was my office, my bedroom. And I just researched and wrote for probably from March to June. My goal was to have it done by my birthday in June, my 40th birthday. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna have this done. So I just for hours, and usually I'd work from about like 4 p.m. to like 2 a.m. That's my magic time. And it's all I lived and breathed and slept this lawsuit. And I have pretty much, I've kind of released that for my own well-being. But it was everything I did was lawsuit, feeling the energy, creating and writing. And so for about 3 months, I just dove deep into that
Okay.
energy.
Okay.
And to fuel me, I because I was doing it for the people. I was doing it
Okay.
for my love of humanity, my love of
Okay.
humans, my love of, going back to the beginning of what makes me come alive. It's learning everyone's individual, beauty, everyone's individual magic. And what I saw, working in the energies is what the war on drugs is it's essentially, it's like a heavy blanket that suppresses individuality, our
Yeah.
magic.
Yeah.
It separates us from, because the controlled substances deals with CNS drugs, central nervous system drugs. So the only drugs that are controlled under these laws are ones that have the potential to affect our emotions, our thoughts, our spirit,
Hmm.
and the ones that numb our emotions and numb our thoughts,
Yeah.
those are legal.
Yeah.
The
Of course.
ones that have the potential to expand our emotions, expand our thoughts, our connection and our connection to ourselves are illegal. And I could see that, and I could see how much shame it has cast upon individuals. Just saw so many broken spirits that people not like I was volunteering in a homeless shelter right before this, and that was really, like the straw that broke the camel's back. And everyone that would come and sit across the table from me, I was writing resumes for them, they wouldn't be able to look me in the eye because they genuinely felt they were worthless. And that just, yeah, I was like, this is not, I saw it as the result of the programming of
Yes.
you're a criminal, you're bad, you're a detriment to
Yeah.
society. And they
Yep.
felt that, and they walked around as though that is truly who they are. And based on what I said earlier, I've been through that. I know what it's like to walk around not knowing your magic and not believing in yourself. And I didn't want anyone to feel that. And I saw one of the sources of that was this war on drugs. Like, it's huge. We criminalize so many people, tell them they're bad for using non-prescription drugs, non-commercial profitable drugs, all for money. And it has crushed the spirits of so many people. And for the future of humanity and Mother Earth and everything, I think it's so important. I want every individual to have the best opportunity to remember who they are, their unique, special magic that they bring. It's like that. People have used like the analogy of like a diamond and all the different facets. It's all
Hmm.
necessary. And I see, everyone's unique magic. If it's all can be realized and brought forth, and they have the courage and the ability to see their own magic, how much better off we will be as humanity. And so this, by challenging the war on drugs and trying to end that, to me, what I saw is lifting that blanket of control, lifting that separation. And people can do what they want. If they want to use pharmaceuticals, that's fine. Whatever they do, it's nobody's business really. But I wanted to lift that control so that people have the best opportunity to remember who they are and be able to bring that and express that freely without shame to humanity. So 2022, I researched, I wrote, and I didn't actually have this claim in there initially. I had like 4 different claims. They're all constitutional based. And I filed the original complaint. And so, okay, so because
With
I was
who'd you
challenged
file this with?
the
Original complaint.
Arizona
Who'd you?
Federal District Court. So I did this all
Okay.
in federal courts. So you start with the lowest court, which is the district court of the federal district court for the state you're in. And so that was Arizona. And the defendants were for the original complaint were the United States. The reason I was able to put the United States as a defendant is because I was challenging the treaty, the international treaties. Otherwise, I would not have been able to put them as an actual defendant. And so I was so happy with that. I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
I want this to say Jennifer Murphy versus the United States.
There you go.
And so I made sure to put that for them first. And I was
There you
so
go.
happy to find, because they're the ones who signed the treaty. It's the United
Yes.
States. So they are now the defendants
Yes.
because I added those treaties. And then so it's the United States, the DEA, because they're the ones who are assigned oversight essentially of the scheduling under the Controlled Substances Act. And then Health and Human Services, because under the Controlled Substances Act, the DEA defers the scheduling to Health and Human Services for like the scientific part of it.
Did not know that. Cool.
Yeah. And so, and then the state of Arizona, because I'm in Arizona, you know, and the state of Arizona does not have their own controlled substances laws. They just simply state we will follow whatever the federal government does.
Whatever federal government. Okay.
Yeah. So that
do Oregon and like California and Denver, do they have their own controlled substances, and that's why mushrooms is decriminalized in some of those states, or is that, or do you know anything about that? Okay.
I don't know.
All right. We're off scope. Okay. So it's
I
really
don't know anything about anything outside of this because
you don't need to, because you're going deep on this one. So you're not, your brain power is, your immense brain power is being used completely on this one. It's summer 2022 and you have decided you are suing the United States, the DEA, Health and Human Services, and the state of Arizona.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to finish it, yes, by my 40th birthday, and I finished it with 12 hours to spare. I was so proud of myself.
Good job.
And then I filed it in like a month or so later. I filed it July, I believe it was 23rd of 2022 or July 21st, I don't remember. And so I filed a complaint. And then I have a certain time period where I'm allowed to amend it without asking the court. Without getting permission from the court, I can amend it by adding claims. I can, do whatever. I can just, it's like, here's my complaint, but hold on, let me kind of redo this a little bit, which requires more work, but it's fine. And so I had until essentially, I guess January of 2023 to amend my
6
complaint.
months. 6 months to amend. Okay.
I just know that's when I filed it. So.
Because it takes months or years to get on the docket to even hear these cases, right? Like even if you filed in July of 2020, you may not be in court for a while after that.
Well, not necessarily. There's certain processes.
Oh. Okay.
I mean, I kind of foresaw it would be a 3-year process, which
right. Okay.
Which we're almost at right now. And that was kind of the generous side of it. And then I'm talking about the whole process up to the United States Supreme Court. But yeah, there's certain things that have to happen. Like once I file a complaint, the defendants have to do something. Like they have to either file an answer or a motion to dismiss, which I'll get to because that's definitely what happened. That's normal. So, okay. So yeah, I filed the complaint and then I was still creating and I was like, there's still something missing, And so during those 6 months, still working with the energy, still creating. And then I figured out a way. I wanted to add the FDA because I know they have their hands in this big time. And I'm like, I want to find a way to add the FDA.
Okay.
And I did.
How did you now I'm curious, how did you know they had their hands in it? Is it just from your research? Did you have, I don't say a premonition or a download or whatever else? Did you just understand how the Byzantine laws work? Like, how did you know that they needed to be a part of this?
I think it's more of a feeling. Like I mean, of course it was based off my research, everything. But I mean, I didn't quite know. I just knew that they were dirty, that there was something there. Because they're the ones who they're the ones who approve drugs.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, you could say in simplistic terms, you could say it's a hunch, but it was a hunch based on months and years of research.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so how I ended up adding them. So like the 2 claims that have remained throughout this process there's the First Amendment freedom of thought, which is one that I added and that's I'm most passionate about. And I'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
And the other one is due process. So when I was going through and I was researching, at the time, fortunately, I had two recent scheduling evaluations. So what happens is once a substance, a drug, or whatever comes to the purview, I guess, comes to the attention of the DEA, meaning it has potential to, if it's a CNS drug, if it has potential to affect our thoughts. I mean, what they say is it have a potential for abuse, but no one
Yeah.
really questions what abuse means. And
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah.
did, and we'll go into that.
Yeah.
So, but essentially, does this have potential to cause people's emotions, moods, and thoughts to change? If it does, we're looking at it. That's how,
Wow.
yes, yes.
Seems like a really low bar to be able to, I mean, because TV affects my thoughts, moods, and emotion. Like, anyway, yeah,
Well,
okay. I mean, this makes more sense now. So yeah, this makes complete
yeah,
sense. So
yeah,
yeah,
that's the thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a lot to kind of help people understand this. So that's the first threshold. So once a substance, has a potential to affect the population's minds, they're like, okay, we want to look at this. Can we make money off of it? Is their first question.
Right, right.
If we can, meaning, is this through a pharmaceutical company, then we're going to approve it. But we're going to make sure it has to go through the FDA, it has to go through them. The FDA gets they're 75% funded by pharmaceutical companies. And the pharmaceutical companies are at the table with negotiations.
Hold up. The FDA is 75% funded by the people that it has a hand
Yes,
in regulating?
exactly,
Like, are we
exactly.
talking like direct payments or taxes or, I mean, I guess those are direct payments in a way. It doesn't really matter. Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that. You think everything's separate, but
yeah.
yeah, that's
Thank you
why you're
for
doing this.
getting it so
Yeah.
instantly.
Okay. That doesn't, well, I've sat with ayahuasca more than a couple dozen times, so we're good.
Nice. Yeah, so that's how I was able to add them. I'm like, wait a second. Okay, so here's the thing. Okay, so once a drug comes to the attention, like whether it's through a pharmaceutical company, because they have to submit new drug applications to get approved through
Okay.
the FDA, they
Okay.
submit an application.
Right.
And if there's anything indicating that it might affect our thoughts or our moods, then the DEA gets flagged and they're like, hey, this should be scheduled so it's controlled so that we get to say who, we get the money. If it's going to affect people's minds, they're going to want it. So, um, so actually what happens then, once a substance or drug comes to the DEA's attention, they then defer the scheduling evaluations to Health and Human Services, which is why I'd added them, because it says that in the Controlled Substance Act. But with further digging, I found that actually Health and Human Services further defers it to the FDA. So it's the FDA that are
Interesting.
doing the scheduling evaluations of what will be criminalized and what will not be criminalized. It's the FDA, the ones who are
Wow.
75% funded by the
By the,
pharmaceutical companies,
yeah.
and
Okay.
they approve these pharmaceutical drugs 90% of the time, fast track
That's
them. There's
weird.
only one person
Huh.
that has to approve them.
Huh. That's weird.
Yeah, I know. So interesting.
Interesting.
So that's why I was able to add the FDA. It was for my due process claim, because the due process is essentially before you can take away someone's liberty rights. And here it's, there's lots of liberty rights here. Our right to privacy, our right to be free from imprisonment was kind of the main one. And our right to informed consent, like to freedom of choice with our healthcare, everything. Before they can take away liberty rights, which are a step below fundamental rights. Fundamental rights they can't really take away, but they can take away liberty rights as long as there's due process. My argument, my claim is that there is no due process here. We have the FDA. I mean, there were so many examples. We have the FDA is the one who's saying what will be criminalized and what won't be criminalized, and that they're funded and have their hand in it. There's conflict of interest there. And also just how they evaluate drugs that come from pharmaceutical companies versus ones that do not come from pharmaceutical companies. I tried to do a side-by-side comparison. Couldn't even really do it because it was just night and day difference.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah, there's, okay.
yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it was just, okay, pharmaceutical company, we're just going to ignore all these legal requirements. We're going to, whatever. And as long as you check these boxes that you have done these tests, we're going to approve you and you're going to be fine. We're going to schedule you in Schedule 2 or above, which means it's legal to possess as long as you go
Yeah.
through their drug dealer. But if it doesn't come from a pharmaceutical company and it has the potential to affect your thoughts and minds, and they're not going to be able to get money from it because it doesn't come from a pharmaceutical company, Schedule 1, you're going to get thrown in prison if you have this substance that doesn't have the government's label on it.
So if I grow a new version of a plant tomorrow, let's say I grow a version of cannabis mixed with mushrooms, mixed with ayahuasca. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but
yeah.
I take it and it makes me see other dimensions,
Mhm.
which if you probably took a combination of all those three, it probably would help you see through other dimensions.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to share it with other people because they wanted to. Like they came, I'm not trying to sell it to them. I'm sharing it freely. I couldn't get it approved and I would likely be arrested immediately and they would take it from me essentially just because I didn't go through the correct process of, I mean, besides growing it and like creating it, I didn't go through the
Mhm.
correct legal process of getting it approved in the proper channels for whatever else.
Kind of.
Is it, I mean,
So
is it
okay, let's
almost that, not quite that simple, but okay.
Yeah, well, so here's the thing. So it's more like, let's say you create this, and then you grow this brand new thing. It creates a new molecule that is not already
Okay.
scheduled.
Right.
It's brand new, and so therefore it hasn't been listed as illegal to possess. It's
Okay.
just something
Okay.
brand new,
Yeah.
and this does happen a lot. Not necessarily with like natural growing substance. Once the DEA hears about that, they're going to then, now it's on their radar that there is something out there that could affect people's minds and people's thoughts and people's, emotions. So now it's on their radar. Now they're going to go do a evaluation to see whether that needs to be criminalized or not, whether that needs to
Okay.
be scheduled.
Okay.
And because it doesn't come from a pharmaceutical company, odds are, I mean, pretty much guaranteed, it's going to now be criminalized because now you're creating something. It doesn't give them money. It doesn't give the government money. It doesn't give anybody money.
And they
Yet
don't,
it has.
and I know the answer to this question, but they don't even have to prove that it causes harm. They just have to prove that it changes people's minds. It has the
Yeah.
potential to change people's minds,
Yes.
emotions, not even that it causes harm. I mean,
Yeah.
everything thing in the wrong dosage can cause harm. Like dosage is usually the amount, but
Exactly.
wow.
It has
So they don't
nothing
have
to
to
do with
prove that it's
harm.
harmful.
It actually
Whoa.
has
Okay.
nothing to do with harm. The way they schedule and everything has nothing to do with harm. And it it's really simple to just to see that is to look at legal pharmaceuticals and to actually do the research, which I have, of how much harm they cause. I mean, and these are all, everything I'm talking about is controlled substances. And so not like blood pressure medication or whatever. That's not in my field, it's not my purview. So, benzodiazepines, all these different things, so harmful, can cause addiction within just a few days. Benzodiazepines are one of the hardest drugs to get off of. And people are scared to get off of them because it can cause death to get off of them. It can cause permanent injury, seizures, all these things. And that's just the withdrawal. That's just one element of it. The harm of these legal pharmaceuticals, I mean, it leads to hundreds of thousands of deaths due to, additional disease, because that's what happens when we cut off and we replace our own natural healing mechanisms with a drug that just shuts that off. And it has to do with our emotions and everything that our body needs to
Yeah.
process. It's
Yeah.
deadly, and it's
Yeah. I mean,
tough.
I was on SSRIs for years, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Like
Yeah.
SSRIs. I don't know if they were going to kill me, but they made me want to kill myself. So, which is essentially
Man.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just cuts things off. It cuts us off and turns us into robots. And I've heard from so many people, I've been a lot of people have been on benzos, and that's one of the common things I hear is it turned me into a zombie. It turned me into a zombie. That's an easy way to control people. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Equilibrium. This is exactly that. I actually quoted
Okay.
that movie in my appeal to the
Yeah.
Ninth Circuit. I'm like,
Nice.
this is
Nice.
exactly like Equilibrium.
Nice. Nice. It's weird. The more substances that I open myself up to, it's amazing seeing the themes in movies that artists have been making for decades. And you're like, oh, that's exactly the thing that I thought when I was on that trip or in that experience or whatever else. And now I'm seeing the artist's interpretation of it. And other people may see it as just like a plot device, but I know exactly what that. And I'm not talking about movies that are made to be trippy, but I'm talking about just themes and storytelling.
Yeah.
It's just you're just okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's incredible. I know.
Okay. All right, Jennifer. So now we're in January of 2023. Couple of claims you've had so far are the freedom of thought claim and the due process claim, and I know you have a third one, or maybe an overarching one that has to do with a First Amendment issue. Do you want to talk about, or could you talk about how that works?
Okay, so in January 2023, I filed an amended complaint, and the amendments that I did were to add the FDA, which we talked about, and was so happy to add them. And then I added a First Amendment claim, freedom of
Right.
thought, which
Right.
I mean, it was all meant to be because that is the core of all of this is the freedom of thought claim.
Yes.
And it's not what
Yes.
most
Yes.
people are going to think immediately when they hear that. It's not about our freedom to think. It's not about that. So
Oh.
the Constitution
Oh. Okay.
is,
Okay.
we have to start there. And it's actually quite beautiful. The Constitution, what it does is, the Bill of Rights, are the amendments, is so we have natural rights as humans. As humans, to have this human experience on earth. We're all created equal, and we all are supposed to have equal opportunity to live our human existence and have our human experience how we please, as long as
Yes.
it doesn't harm
Yes.
anybody else. And there's certain
Yes. Yes.
protections that naturally come with being human. One of those protections is to have to feel and to think as we please, because that is something that is so internal. That is something that involves no one else. To me, it's probably the most sacred rights, freedoms that we have. Is because that's the only thing as humans that we have, because that is the one thing that is ours. We choose whether to express our thoughts, our feelings. And then
Right.
at that point, it can be
Right.
essentially judged because now you might be involving other people. So the First
Yeah.
Amendment covers freedom of speech, of belief. It has kind of various freedoms that stem out from freedom of speech. And one of those freedoms is freedom of thought. And essentially, what the Constitution says is we have these freedoms, and we're going to make sure we write these in there. They should be a given, but we can, as humans, can think and feel and believe whatever we want. But I'm just so grateful to whoever drafted the Constitution, or to those who drafted these amendments, because they knew. I feel like they knew. They're like, okay, this should be a given that we have these human rights, but we're going to put this down on
Yeah.
paper.
Yeah.
They
Just to make sure that everyone else knows.
Exactly. It was to prevent government intrusion. So it says, yes, we have these rights to think, feel, believe however we want. And what it says is that the government cannot intrude on those rights. That's the purpose of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, is that the government is just putting it out there. Government, you cannot interfere with these. These are sacred. These are ours. I think it's the most beautiful protection we have is the freedom of thought. Because again, that is something that is all internal, and the government is prohibited from even entering that space for any reason, but especially for reasons of punishment. They cannot go in and say, what are you thinking? We don't want you thinking that. So we're going to take away this right. We're going to punish you. We're going to deprive you of a government benefit. We're going to do whatever based on what we think your thoughts are. It is a very strict line. And the United States Supreme Court has outlined this particular freedom of thought, and has defined that that's what it is that it is a realm, it is a internal realm that the government cannot go in. They cannot go in because it's impossible. Anyways, you can never know what someone's actual thoughts are. We can express them, but that will still never be exactly what they are. That's it's the most sacred thing we have. And I think it's so beautiful that the United States Supreme Court has recognized this. And there's been cases that has said, based on national security, we need to go into these people's minds to see what they might be thinking, because we don't want them to overthrow our government. So they have cited reasons for national security. They have cited reasons for, there's a case that I cited that where it was criminalized to possess material, which were like magazines, that the government deemed obscene, because the government did not want certain
Yeah.
thoughts to occur.
Yeah.
in a person's
Yeah.
mind by viewing that material. And the United States Supreme Court struck that down. And time again, there hasn't been that many because the government hasn't dared go into that sacred realm too often, at least not brought to the courts. But it is such a clear, strict thing that there is no justification allowed. The government absolutely cannot enter our thoughts, investigate our thoughts, try to determine what our thoughts might be for the purpose of criminalization, of punishing or denying a benefit. They just can't do
Right.
that.
Right. So you're saying
So,
the movie Minority Report. You're saying the movie Minority Report was a complete government overreach, where they used people who could see into your minds to determine if you were going to commit a crime, and they would arrest you before you actually did the thing that your mind was
yes,
doing. So having the thought is okay. It's up until you actually do it that you're fine.
yes, exactly. And that was another.
That's a great movie too, but for
I'll have to
reasons
watch
other
that.
than that.
And that actually brings up another point because this is also something I included in the lawsuit. The government also is prohibited from justifying laws to prevent future crime. Like they gave examples, like, you can't prohibit the possession of chemistry books just because someone might create a bomb, you know?
Oh, and that's why my mushroom spores and my mushroom growing kit are legal, but the actual mushrooms that I grow are technically illegal. Oh, okay,
Maybe, yeah.
that's a practical example,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, I get you. Okay. Yeah. Not that
So,
I grow mushrooms in my closet, but
yeah, of course not. Um, so that's another thing. Like if the government were to come and say, and a lot of people, the society actually thinks this, like they're for the war on drugs because in their minds, it leads to less crime. They think people doing non-prescription drugs leads to crime. And therefore it should be criminalized, should be penalized because we want to prevent other crime. Yeah, there's so many fallacies, there's so many things where people aren't thinking that through. But that's something the government cannot say that we are criminalizing the possession of these substances because it could cause you to assault another or to
right.
commit armed robbery or something. There's already criminal penalties for that,
Yes.
what the Controlled Substances Act criminalizes is a very harmless act, is simply holding in your hand, having in your pocket a product.
Yeah.
A product.
Yeah.
That's it. That's harmless in and of itself. And that simple act has led to the imprisonment of millions of people and the harm, the shame, the broken spirits of millions and millions, the separation of families, all because they held in their hand a product that doesn't have the government's label on it. It's a very harmless act. There is no other law out there that has caused this much harm for such a harmless act. And even the act of consuming a pill, inhaling, even just that act, harmless. What they care about is what happens internally in your mind, to your emotions, to your thoughts when you consume a substance that is in your possession. That is all they care about. And that's why I have the freedom of thought claim, because they're not allowed to go in and investigate what we might be thinking, what we might be feeling if we consume a substance. They can't go there. But that's 90% of the drug evaluations are investigating just that. So everything, yes. I mean, you would be blown away at the statements that are in these evaluations. So what they're doing is they're looking for, like, the main focus of their investigations, their evaluations of each substance that comes under, that is scheduled. They're looking at its potential for abuse. Well, we have to ask, what is abuse? Everyone just kind of thinks like, oh, abuse, yeah, that's bad. We don't want drug abuse, blah, blah, blah. Well, abuse refers to our thoughts, feelings, and desires before we consume a substance, while after we've consumed the substance, and then afterwards. What are we thinking once we're done consuming that substance?
So where's the abuse in that? I don't understand. Like,
Yeah.
I'm with you. Like, I don't understand I can understand maybe if you took this substance and it made everyone sick, and that would then overload the medical system, which then would hurt other people. Like that's something you could actually understand as an argument, right? Like
Yeah.
I get that. Like we
Yeah.
shouldn't probably drink bleach, but it's not illegal to drink bleach,
Yeah,
which is weird.
exactly. It's not because it
And
doesn't affect your thoughts or moods. So
yeah, that's
they don't care.
weird. It's weird. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So that's exactly what they're looking for. And it's so obvious. It's all right there. Uh, it's just, it's hard to express because to me it's so obvious. So what they do, they look at, let's say a substance comes to their attention that it might affect our thoughts, moods, or whatever. Well, then they require, whether it's a pharmaceutical company or just the FDA in general, if it doesn't come from a pharmaceutical company, they're looking at what it does to our thoughts, feelings, and desires. And that's 90% of what they're looking for. So
When you're saying that it's 100% illegal and unconstitutional.
that, yep, 100%. It should be a
Okay.
clear cut. I mean, there's
Okay.
really no such thing as a checkmate argument in
Yeah.
law, but this is,
But it's, yeah.
if they have the courage and non-corruption to see it. This is really actually a whistleblower action. So the freedom of thought. So yeah, so yes, they are prohibited from entering these intimate internal realms for the purpose of creating criminal penalties. Yet that's 90% of what they do. So I have this document, which is the guidance for pharmaceutical companies. If a pharmaceutical company has a CNS drug and they want to get that approved by the FDA. So essentially, it's the DEA defers it to HHS. Then HHS defers the evaluations to FDA. Well, the FDA actually defers the evaluations to the pharmaceutical companies themselves and says, okay, you need to document what this might do to people's moods, to people's thoughts, to people's feelings. And we require you to study on animals. The reason they do studies on rats is to determine what we as humans might be thinking and might be feeling when we consume these substances. They actually assign, this is in their evaluation documents too, public record, they assign government employees to go to the internet and go to chat rooms and try to determine if people are talking about substances and taking them. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? Why are they taking these? Do they want to feel a certain way? They actually assign people to go do that, and they document that in the evaluations. Okay, people are taking this because they want to feel this, and
Yeah.
that's bad. So therefore,
And they get to determine what bad is.
exactly. It's
Okay.
all let's document what people might be thinking, and of course, it's all speculation because
Yeah.
you can't know what's internal of somebody.
Yeah. No.
And if it causes someone, okay, so another thing, there's a lot of stuff, so I'm trying to say it concisely, but the main thing that they're looking for, because they have guidance documents of how to evaluate drugs, and this is what they give to the pharmaceutical companies, what they're supposed to document. The main thing they're looking for is euphoria. That is a key element, is euphoria. And they actually put that in the document. And what is euphoria? Extreme happiness. So if a drug is likely to cause euphoria, which they actually define, I mean, I looked, the dictionary, and that's how it defines it. But they actually define it as abnormal thinking, which who determines what is abnormal thinking, for one?
Right. Right.
Changes in mood, elevated mood.
Okay.
I can't remember what else, but that is considered a key finding. And that is what these pharmaceutical companies and the FDA are looking for. Is there indications of changes in mood and euphoria specifically?
I mean, you could make that claim about, I don't drink much caffeine. When I have a full cup of coffee, I experience elevated mood, a change in mood, a little euphoria, not a lot, but a little euphoria. So, but because that doesn't make me want to doesn't make me want to overthrow the government any more than I normally want to.
Yeah,
That's okay because that's easily controlled. They can make money off it. They can tax it.
exactly. They don't care if it causes, it's like, okay, does it cause euphoria? Okay, then it's going to make us some money. So
Right.
if
Okay.
it goes to the
So
pharmaceutical company.
it feels like this is just a capitalistic argument everywhere around. If it can make us money, we want to be able to control it. Period.
Mhm.
Okay.
They have infiltrated, I mean,
Yay,
the medical
capitalism.
schools, everything. It's all about control of the population, control of our emotions, what they think and everything, or what they think they're doing. So yeah, that's what they do. And that's their main goal, is to determine with every evaluation, every time something is scheduled, and even in the beginning, when there's lots of things that were scheduled without really having these evaluations, they were just initially scheduled when the Controlled Substances Act and these treaties were put into place. It was done with no logic, with no lawful justification. And there's some quotes in there that, like, okay, so when I was researching for the international treaties, I was looking at documents from the World Health Organization because they're the ones who essentially are tasked with evaluating substances that are under those treaties. And then they evaluate, they give their recommendation, and then the Secretary General of the United Nations, based off the WHO's recommendation, says, okay, these are going to be scheduled like this. Well, the WHO is given so much discretion. There's really not any guidelines. They can say whatever they want. And so I found a document from 1965 that I cited in the complaint, where they essentially went through different categories of substances. And this is what they used this document as basis to determine, to command the countries that were, that are parties to criminalize or not criminalize, or, to make it where people can't even possess this. And so in that document, they went through different categories of substances. And one of the substances was morphine type drugs, so opiates, all that stuff. And they went through and said, this can cause, physical dependency within a couple of days. It can cause harm. It's toxic, all this stuff. It can cause psychological dependency, bad. And then in that same document, they analyzed what they called LSD type substances. That's just what they kind of categorized everything as at that point in time in 1965. And in that section, they said, does not cause dependency. People could use them, and if they don't have it again, they're fine. It doesn't cause physical or psychological dependency, but it is used by nonconformists. It is used by those with intellectual and artistic pursuits. It is used by the people to gain insight into their personal issues. It is used by people to expand their consciousness.
Sounds like a good thing.
And so what's the result of that document? These treaties that say those substances that people are using to expand their minds by nonconformists cannot possess whatsoever, Schedule 1. And then the morphine type that causes all this harm and everything, we're going to put that in Schedule 4. I think it was Schedule 4 or Schedule 3.
So there was never really like any sort of actual logical basis for any of this.
And they've gotten away with it.
Because the scale that they were using to determine all this was just wrong from the beginning. Like, yeah, they did the research, and yeah, they did all this. They have the numbers, but the way the questions they were asking were essentially flawed from the very beginning. So there was no way to get. Okay.
So like those statements really have no business even being in government documents.
No.
What we're thinking, none. What we're feeling. Yeah. There's also I also quoted. It was something from, I think it's still from the World Health Organization, but it was talking about what is psychological dependency. And they wrote in there how many times a day a person thinks about using a substance. This is in documents that have led to the death and criminalization of millions of people. These statements should never even be in those documents, but they're everywhere.
In literally being prosecuted for the thoughts you have in your head during the day. If you put like a tracker inside of my brain, and I've committed multiple felonies in my head. I'm not thought them out, but like the thoughts of like, hey, that's stupid. Maybe we should just eradicate that. And I wouldn't do it because of course you wouldn't do it. Wow.
And these aren't even harmful thoughts. I mean, they're thoughts of, oh, I'm feeling happy.
It's just anything. Wow. This is.
Yes.
Wow.
Thank you for getting it. Like, that's why it just blows me away. Like, how is this? These are, and what, it's amazing. So these have no place being in government documents, any of those things, much less being created into one of the most harmful, highly resulting in the most imprisonment of humans based on this. And so that's the First Amendment freedom of thought claim. It's a whistleblower. It's a prosecuting. I'm not defending or standing up for our rights. We already have our rights. What I'm doing is I'm calling out the government saying, you cannot go in there. You are not allowed to go in those sacred realms.
Right.
And it is everywhere. Everywhere you turn. It's even in the preamble of what the purpose of the Controlled Substances Act and those international treaties are. They say to combat and prevent drug abuse. So that means their purpose is to combat and prevent certain thoughts, feelings, and desires that they don't want.
Okay, yeah. So when you hear drug abuse, you think of people getting sick or harmed, or because I see what happens when people get addicted to painkillers. Like you can see them, their lives their lives get worse, clearly, because they're in, well, first of all, they're in pain, so that sucks. Like, I'm not saying painkillers should be illegal, but
Yeah.
like you can tell, like, the life starts to leave them and they get grumpy and angry and they feel like crap. But that's harmful. It's almost like you assume abuse means harm, personal or external harm, but not, oh, this is like, they've like twisted the meaning of the word abuse, and that's where
Yes,
all this is coming from. Okay.
exactly. And they cast a spell onto humanity that we're okay with that because we just think, oh, abuse is bad. Let's condone the
Yeah.
government imprisoning
Yeah.
people because they use non-government approved products. Like, we are okay with our fellow human. I mean, that's no different as if I were to possess like some homemade juice or some homemade, if I made homemade like body products like shampoo or whatever. And because the government doesn't have their label and they're not getting their cut
Right.
on that, no, we're
Right.
putting you in prison. It is no different. And they might
Because
say, oh,
that could,
it's because we can't verify that you've pasteurized that product enough for your safety. They might make up something like that.
and you could see now, if your product was then causing harm to people and they could prove that, then you'd be like, okay, well, that I get that argument. But they're not even going to that far.
Well, yeah.
They're not even
Yeah.
doing that part of it. Okay.
Well, and that's the
Jesus.
thing. Okay, that's the other part of it. Like, okay, so let's
Yeah.
say we have a like this is all about the consumer. This is a punishing consumers, which has
Right.
never been done before.
No.
This is huge that it's straight up genocide. And so let's say we have a bad product out there. Are we going to punish the consumer for buying that product? No,
Well,
you're going to
yes.
go to the manufacturer and
You
say,
should. Yeah.
hey, you can't
Stop
do
making
that,
that.
you know?
Right.
You're not going to say, oh, they're using it irresponsibly. They're using it in a way that we didn't want. So therefore, you should pit that consumer who purchased this product, who is now feeling these things or who might, now their liver is harmed, whatever, they deserve to be in prison. And that's what we're doing. It's
Doesn't
like
make
it's
any sense. Okay.
punishing
Yeah.
non-compliant consumers
Right.
and
Right.
not the manufacturer or anything.
Wow. Wow.
And that's all it is. It's show us your papers. It's like, okay, we
Yeah.
don't care about the harm.
Okay.
You have drugs in your pocket. Let's see the papers. You got your papers, the prescription. Okay, you're good. We'll let you go. Oh, you don't got
Yeah.
your papers. You didn't go through us. You didn't go through our drug dealers. You didn't go through our system. Then you're
Yeah.
going to prison. It's non-compliant. It's a totally consumer law to create a monopoly of it, taking over the entire healthcare system.
Yeah, I mean, a really good example of this is the medical marijuana cards that Arizona offer, or many states offer. Because I know that you can't tell the difference between cannabis that I've got from, well, at first glance anyway, you can't tell the difference between cannabis that I bought from a dispensary and cannabis that I may have grown in my backyard or my neighbor may have given to me, because it all looks the same. It all looks
Yeah,
the same.
yeah.
And the only reason that I have my medical cannabis card is simply because I don't want to have to deal with the hassle if I ever get asked about it. I can just say, here's this card, but there's nothing, it's not actually protecting me from anything. It's not like there's better standards having that card. The card that I have is not ensuring that the cannabis I have is properly grown or, if you want to call it tested for pesticides or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
just like a permission slip almost. It's not a protection thing, it's a permission slip.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. January 2023, you said you have 5 claims. Were all those 5 claims in that amended complaint?
Yes. Yeah.
So you've
So I
got the
added that freedom of thought.
freedom of thought. So you have due process, freedom of thought. Do you know all 5 claims off the top of your head?
Let's see here. There's the 10th Amendment, which had to do with the federal government going into state territory. So what happened
Yeah.
next? This is normal. Whenever someone files a lawsuit, they file a complaint. What will normally happen in litigation is that the defendants will file a motion to dismiss. And what they're saying there is essentially we shouldn't even waste our time going to trial, going through the discovery phase, interviews, all that, requesting documents. We shouldn't even go there and waste anybody's time because these claims have no basis in law. Because I mean, really anyone
Okay.
can file a lawsuit, but if it's like
Yeah.
bogus, then you're not going to make the defendants and the courts and everyone go through the whole process. You can say, no, let's throw it out now. And so that's normal. So they filed motions to dismiss, the United States and the state of Arizona, and filed motions to dismiss. And I, of course, got the opportunity to respond to that. And it's supposed to be fairly lenient for the plaintiff, for the person bringing the claim, because you don't really have to prove, you're not supposed to have to prove your claims right out the gate. You just have
Yes.
to at least say, this is my claims, and these are just enough facts to show this is why the claim applies.
You basically have to prove that it's not frivolous. Just like, here,
Yeah,
I didn't just write this thing and hand it in. I actually have reasons. Here's
yeah.
some top level reasons. Let's go. Okay. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not supposed to, because you're not supposed to be completely barred from the courts. That's
Right.
why it's supposed to be pretty lenient. It's like, okay, we
Right.
don't expect these people, especially if someone who's not an attorney wants to bring something, it's supposed to be available to people. You just have enough intelligence in there, some logic connecting the dots. With how significant this is and the claims that I brought, I wasn't really expecting the federal district court to continue with this, because they're not going to want to touch this. Because by them saying, yes, she has claims and all that, that's a decision they don't want to make. They want to push that up and push it up. They're like, I'm not touching that. That's too big. To end the war on drugs, I'm not even touching that. With the judge, after getting the motion to dismiss and me, responding, then I waited 9 months for the judge. I was checking email every day. It was a grueling 9 months, but I was, waiting for that decision. And I knew whatever that decision was, the judge could either dismiss some of the claims and keep some, which is kind of usually what happens. He could dismiss all the claims, or he could keep all the claims.
And this is up to the judge's discretion, the sole judge.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is the single judge right here.
In the Federal District Court of Arizona. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So best case scenario would have been for me to dismiss all the claims, because if he dismisses some of the claims and not all the claims, like let's say he dismissed my First Amendment claim and my due process claim, but kept the others, I would not be able to appeal those claims, because I would have to go to trial on the other claims and wait till those were done.
Which just takes more resources and time and all that type of stuff. Okay.
Exactly. And I'm by myself, like I can do it. I can do the depositions and go through all the discovery. I know I would figure it out, but yes. So when I got the decision, it was actually it was the best thing that could have happened. He dismissed all the claims, but he gave me standing. So he said I had a right, I had injury, and standing is huge. To get standing, like that's a big hurdle.
Okay.
So it was beautiful, because he gave me what he did is essentially give me a golden ticket to the Ninth Circuit, because that was my next step.
Now the next level of court.
Yeah, which is fast tracking me to the United States Supreme Court.
Wow.
So it was good. My next step then. So I got that in March of last year. I got that decision.
Okay. March of 2024.
Yeah.
So it has taken from filing in January of 2020, filing in July of 2022, and then you finish up in January 2023, and then 9 months later they dismiss, and then you finally get in 2024, March of 2024, then the next steps are basically ready.
Kind of. Okay. Yeah. So like between when I filed the minute complaint in January 2023, I mean, it was a year and a few months. Because we had to go through the motion to dismiss, filing a response, a reply, and of course the United States is like, we want an extension to file this. We want an extension, everything. I'm like, whatever. Course, I trust the timing.
Sure. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So now it's March of 2024.
Yes.
He gives you get standing and all your claims dismissed, and so now you're going up to a higher court, I'm assuming.
Yes. So now it's time to draft my appellate brief, and so I'm still by myself. But
could you do is there a quick explanation of what an appellate brief is?
So
just in case anyone listening doesn't know.
Yeah. So what you're doing is I'm now going to the I don't have to. I could just leave it at that and say, okay, it's dismissed. I'm done. But it's requesting. So the next level, the appellate courts, there's circuits. They do different regions. So the Ninth Circuit covers, and this is the federal court system. So you have the district court, which is the lower court. That's in each state. And then you go regional for the appellate court. And the Ninth Circuit covers California, Arizona, Washington, Oregon, I think Colorado, Utah. I don't really know exactly, but that region.
So wait, so an appellate brief is just a brief for the appellate courts. Is it that simple? Oh, okay. All right. So I got that part. All right.
Yeah. It's essentially asking that court to review the district court's decision and saying, you know what, the district court should not have dismissed this because I clearly stated claims that had merits. And so that's my job in the appellate brief, is to say that, that this is what happened. They dismissed this. they shouldn't have dismissed it because, this and this and this. So that was filed August of last year.
August of 2024. Okay.
Yes. Had to go into isolation, went offline, told everyone don't text me, whatever. I went in and drafted this, and it was so cool. Like, me being by myself, I don't care. I'm going to write whatever I want. And that's where, in my appellate brief, is where I talked about the movie Equilibrium. I used the word magic a couple times in the introduction, like, because it's just like, hey, like, what the heck? I knew that whatever the Ninth Circuit decided, what I thought is that it was going to be big, because whether they decided in my favor or not, it is the Ninth Circuit. And for them to analyze these claims, everything that I put out there, exposing decades of unlawful government conduct and the corruption and everything, and whatever they said, good or bad, whatever, it would be known. It would be, it would have impact because it's the Ninth Circuit. And so very few cases, they get thousands of appeals every year. And very few cases get called for oral argument. And what that is where the court, the Ninth Circuit, kind of sees the briefs and they say, you know what, we want a little bit more understanding about this. So we're going to call in the parties and ask them to present orally.
That sounds like a good thing for you.
Yes. Like, so I got the news on December 6th. I got an email, it was a Saturday, saying that they wanted to do oral argument. So just less than 4 months after I filed the brief. I wasn't expecting to hear anything for a long time. And then just randomly, and actually I was at an ayahuasca ceremony, and for that weekend I was helping out with one, facilitating. And so I got the news and I literally fell to my knees crying, mainly because that means that I did so much work on myself that I could actually stand up in front of the Ninth Circuit and talk on behalf of all the people. It was just an unbelievable moment. It's something I had been manifesting. I've been seeing myself in front of the court for a few years, and just I always saw it. And then the day, arrived and they asked me to do oral argument, and it was scheduled for April 1st of this year. So just a few weeks ago.
So quick question. So do you consider yourself someone who's naturally, I don't know if natural's the word, well, naturally maybe, good at speaking to a room full of people? Or are you someone who needs to practice that type of thing and sort of get in the right mindset? Or like, I mean, do you get stage fright, like that type of thing? Does that affect you? Okay.
That's why this was so huge. Cause I would get panic attack. That's one of the reasons another reason why I delayed going to law school. Because I'm like, there's no way I can speak in front of people. I would get panic attacks, even just speaking in front of a few people, because back to that self-worth thing, I didn't think anything I said had value. Seriously hated myself. Like, I just saw nothing. And so it scared me shitless to get up and speak my voice. And so I lived my whole life like that, where I would get panic attacks and like literally black out and not be able to even speak.
Right.
Even sometimes I felt it come on with even just like 3 people in front of me.
Yeah.
But I was
so while you're in between filing these lawsuits, or in the middle of it, you're going to ayahuasca ceremonies in locations. And that is actually, I don't know, healing, helping you remember, whatever, your ability to talk to a room full or multiple people. Oh, yes. So you're doing self-work. You're doing self-work at the same time you're doing lawsuit work. And they're just going consecutively, or not consecutively, but concurrently. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
And I would say the majority of it was self-work, because it was like, I saw this, I knew it was big, and I knew I'd have to be speaking out in the public and everything. It was like a joke. It's like my higher self is like, oh, you get panic attacks, you can't talk in front of people. Well, guess what you're gonna do? You're gonna file the biggest lawsuit in history, and then we're on drugs. It's like, shit.
Yeah.
And so
a cosmic joke right there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I filed it and I had to catch up. Like, most of my work in the isolation, it's not even, I mean, ceremony has helped, but most of it, I do all the time on myself. And it was about learning to love myself and learning myself, my self-worth, and learning to be okay, with people, like saying bad things, and just like it took so much work. I mean, there was times I didn't think it was even possible, because how deep rooted my lack of self-worth was.
Right.
But I had done so much work so that I could do this, and that's why I fell to my knees crying when I got that news, because that meant that I could do this, that I could actually do that. It's been incredible, and I'm so proud of myself.
Wow. Hold on. Could we do a breathing exercise real quick? I just want to hold
Yeah.
that feeling you have
Yeah.
right here. So I'm gonna do it I'm gonna do this 3 times. I'm gonna breathe out through my mouth like I'm breathing out through a straw. I'm gonna breathe in through my nose and fill up my belly, and then I'm gonna sigh. So you want to do it together, cool, but I just want to feel that feeling, right? That you're feeling right. I want to share that a little bit. So let's go ahead and breathe out. In through your nose to your belly. And sigh. Oh. Breathe out through a straw. Through your nose into your belly. And sigh. Oh. Breathe out through a straw. In your nose to your belly. And sigh. Oh. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
That was awesome. That was really cool. So this is a breakthrough for you in like 9 different ways. Wow. 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 Wow.
It's been a really rough journey. It's,
Wow. Yeah.
thinking I've been on the border of, I'm always questioning, am I delusional? It's like
Yeah.
no one else really sees this dream,
Yeah.
this huge thing other than
Yeah.
me, like my best friend
Yeah.
does. And I've lost family over this. I've,
Yeah.
lost a lot of, there's just people that don't understand, that don't
Yeah.
want to see, that are jealous. What, I don't know. I don't know what it is.
There
But it,
you're shaking up their idea of the world. I mean, that's
yeah,
really what you're doing. Wow.
yeah. So I've
That is
had to work
so
on my
cool.
self-protection and everything,
Uh-huh.
like I have a very good communication relationship with my higher selves and my team and everything, and I know I'm so protected, and um yeah, so it's been quite a journey. It's been very challenging, especially being alone 99% of the time for the past
Bet.
3 years.
I bet.
That's a different type of mastery right there.
Wow.
So yeah.
That is this alone, this realization alone, this is amazing. I mean, I know you've had a whole bunch of other things, but like this is how cool is that? So this is it's almost like this entire thing was part of your healing journey. It wasn't just something you were doing. It was part of a healing journey that you needed to be on in order to be the person that I don't want to
Everything.
say your best self, your highest self, your truest self, your fullest self,
Yeah.
whatever you want to. Wow.
Yeah, and to be able to do this too, I mean, to the fear, because I mean, to
Yeah.
step off the chessboard, have
Yeah.
to dare to unveil the matrix and everything.
Yeah.
There's energies that come,
Yes.
they
Yes.
try to stop you, and I knew that, and I've received training, training for to
Uh-huh.
recognize those energies, and
Uh-huh.
I'm fearless because I see them. I don't, they can't get to me. And so that's why I was put in this position to be able to do this and challenge these, and also hidden. Because like I thought this was going to blow up when I filed the complaint. I thought it was going to be like on the news and everything was
Yeah.
going to be big and everything. And I reached out to people,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
nothing,
But
nothing.
you weren't ready for that yet.
No.
And so it couldn't because you weren't ready, so it couldn't happen.
Yeah.
Wow. And you
Yeah.
couldn't have done anything to make yourself ready any faster than you did. Like the process is the process.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I just trusted. I trust that I was, because I mean, I truly believe if those energies really knew how much of a threat this is, then it would be a different story. But I think everything's been veiled, everything's been cloaked. I trust that.
Wow.
But now
Wow.
there's still a part of me that doesn't know what's going to happen. Like this might. So, okay. So we can go
Yeah.
back
So
to.
okay, we're in December. Thank you. Thank you. We're
No,
in
thank
December
you. I love talking about that stuff too.
December 2024. You get that you're in an oral argument, which is I know this one. It's scheduled for April
Yeah.
1st, 2025. All right. So hey, I knew something. So what happens in between December and April to like what are you doing in that time span?
I'm, so my goal was for those few months was to take care of myself and to prepare to go. Like, it was interesting. It was a new energy that I had never felt. But what I was called to do was to just purify my vessel and make sure that I was ready for whatever energy wanted to work through me
Mhm.
during that oral argument,
Mhm.
that it could. And so my job was just to be a clean channel, a clean vessel, and trust and surrender to whatever wanted to work through me that day on April 1st. And
Now, is there anything that you're doing particularly? I mean, I'm assuming you're meditating. I'm assuming you're, eating proper. Is there anything that is there anything that you're doing specifically, or is it just sort of an all-encompassing idea of preparing? I mean, are you talking to the mirror? Are you recording yourself? Are you speaking up more at ceremonies that you're going to? Like, is there anything that you're doing? Is there more of a visualization and a thought process?
it's more of a visualization. There
Mm,
really wasn't much.
mm.
Of course, I think, about meditating. I think we all kind of a lot of us think about meditating more, than we ever do. But I kind of stopped even doing that because then I wouldn't meditate and then I didn't want to judge myself. So I just kind of trusted my process every day. I wasn't really like disciplined or had a practice or anything. It was more important to me to not judge myself and to just flow with whatever came up that day.
Okay. So that sounds to me like mindfulness, which I believe is more helpful than straight meditating for most of us. You're staying in the moment, you're going with whatever comes up, non-judgmental type thing.
Yeah.
I term that mindfulness. So cool. Okay. So you're basically practicing mindfulness at a level that
Yeah.
you've never been able to before,
Yeah,
right?
just trusting. I mean, there's of course
Yeah.
a lot of questioning, there's a lot of crying, there's a lot of
Yeah.
sleeping, there's a lot of, but
Yeah.
it's not judging myself, not saying that
Right.
I'm doing anything wrong,
Right.
just letting it happen. And then I learn from every experience. If I'm down in a dark cloud and retreating into my cave even more than I thought possible, all that, I trust it and I learn. It may be difficult, but I just learn from everything, every single experience.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, that was my goal, And then a couple weeks before oral argument, like what my goal was too, was to have that whole courtroom packed. Like I
Yes.
knew this was a chance. Like in
Yes.
order to make this, how I felt, in order for this
Right.
to work,
Right.
is not me just staying quiet and living in my cave and just filing this
Right.
all quietly and everything. It's kind of what happened, but I was like, okay, no, this is important. I need to get the word out. Everyone, I want that courtroom full of people during oral arguments, just so when we walk in, that those three judges on the panel, they know, like, hey, they're watching. This is serious, and the pressure's on essentially. Like it's in their hands. But 2 weeks before oral argument, I got notification that they canceled it.
Ugh.
They decided to
Ugh.
just make the decision based off of the briefs alone. Yeah,
There's
it
no,
was
and there's
okay.
and
I was
there
like, okay.
and there's no appealing that, I'm assuming. There's no appeal involved in that.
No.
That's annoying.
So yeah,
All right.
but it was okay. I
Yeah.
trust. I don't really look at anything bad, at all. I trust because I can't. I just trust the design. This is so out of my hands. All I can do is the best I can do, and I don't ever put any pressure on myself. Like, oh
Right.
no, it should be different.
And your brief is really good. Your lawsuit is really good. Like your research is really good. It's not like this is hurting your argument at all. You just don't get the chance to
Yes.
amplify the power, which may be why they canceled it, because they
Oh, I
knew
know.
that. Okay. All right.
Yep. Because I had a good friend
Okay.
who was calling the courts trying to figure out how
Right.
many people can they seat, blah blah blah.
Right.
And so
Right.
who knows? There's a chance that they got a word and they're like, no. And so then, okay, so then I didn't know I was gonna get a notification, but I got a notification on April 1st from the courts saying, okay, the briefs have officially been submitted to these three judges. So I'm like, okay, this could take 3 to 6 months, whatever, for them to do a decision. This is still good. It's just I don't have that platform, publicly to speak. And then not 5 business days later, or 1 week later, on April 7th, I got the decision from the Ninth Circuit. And it is, all my vision of all of this, what they did is something I never guessed they would do. Because I thought at a minimum, this is the courts. I put so much, it's like a research paper, of so much stuff, and it is beautiful. I'm very proud of myself for what I wrote.
Yeah.
And what they did is they only took a few days. They looked at this
Of course.
and they wrote just a few sentences,
Of
and they
course.
said this is a non-public. This opinion is not to be published, and it is not to be used as precedent for anything. And they agreed with the district court and they applied incorrect law. They just wrote a few sentences and said, done, gone. That was really disheartening because I just had not considered they wouldn't even analyze the claims.
Right.
And so essentially what they did, I mean, what they did was such an injustice to the people because
Right.
that is our only opportunity. I'm essentially prosecuting the government for unlawful
Right.
actions. We have no
Right.
other option but to bring it to the court's attention.
Yeah.
You know, if they violating the Constitution, they're intruding on our rights. They're, you
Yeah.
know, they're doing unlawful things. That is our avenue as the people,
Yeah.
is to
This
bring
is
it
how
to
we
the court's
redress our
attention.
grievances. Instead of
Yeah,
burning buildings down, we file lawsuits.
exactly. And they just brushed it under the rug, didn't even analyze it, didn't even like question anything, and they applied incorrect law.
Jesus.
So one of the things that really upset me is that when I was granted standing, I was actually denied standing to bring claims against those two international treaties because they said they're not domestic law. They have to be domestic law to be adjudicated in domestic courts, but that's not true. Things become domestic law through acts of Congress. So there can be international treaties out there, but if Congress, if those treaties are then enacted into a federal law, then they're now law that I can challenge. Anybody can challenge. But what they said is like they lied. They completely applied incorrect law, and they said because these treaties are non-self-executing, meaning they weren't immediately put into law the second the United States signed them, you know, back in 1965,
Yeah.
then therefore I can't challenge them. But they were clearly put into domestic law. All the things that I cite as, you know, using, possessing, whatever, were scheduled through those international treaties. And those international treaties were then taken and then they're written into the Controlled Substances Act that they said we are implementing these treaties
Yeah.
into law.
Yeah.
And therefore, in the United States government, whatever the World Health Organization decides, they just automatically schedule according to that. So they've now made these things untouchable.
Yeah.
That,
So,
yeah,
yeah, no, keep going. So you can't challenge the treaties, but there's no law that was written based on the treaties. There's no law to challenge either,
there is though.
right?
That's the thing. They
There
said
is.
there's
Okay, there
not.
is. Okay, there is.
But they
Okay.
said there's not. Like, so they became law. So essentially,
Yeah.
we have a law that people are getting arrested under. It originated in these international treaties, and because of those
Uh-huh.
treaties, because of what the UN and the World Health Organization decided, people are getting arrested for what they decided. And
Yeah.
those treaties were written into law. So now we have a law that is causing the imprisonment of millions of people that are unchallenged, that they have stated are we can't challenge them. That is so
That doesn't make
unconstitutional,
any
so against the
sense.
law.
That doesn't make any
Because
sense.
I know. It was a big injustice for all the people.
You should be able to
For
challenge any law. I'm not saying you're going to win, but you should be able to challenge it.
exactly. And they said no. They made those untouchable. So yeah.
Okay. Well,
So
what's next?
so what's next is the United States Supreme Court. But I'm going in a little disheartened. I'm trying to work through that because I mean this was just a few weeks ago that I got this decision.
5 weeks ago. Like, this is really fresh.
Yeah. And I was all I didn't care what the Ninth Circuit decided. I was like, oh, it's okay. My next step will be U.S. Supreme Court. It's cool. But now seeing what the Ninth Circuit could do, that they could just brush this under the rug and not even look at it, it really confirmed to me that this could be over because the United States Supreme Court is not required to even look at this at all. Like the appellate courts are at least required to say something. They're required. But the United States Supreme Court, they get lots of petitions
Yeah,
every
they
year.
can
And
refuse
they
to
can say,
hear
nah,
it.
I'm not going to look at it. No, they're not required. So I could draft this petition and write all that, you know, like this was an injustice, everything. And they could just say, nope. Because they might decide that they don't even want to touch the war on drugs. For them to decide that, yes, we could potentially end the war on drugs, they might, politically motivated, you know, financially motivated, whatever, they could so easily just ignore this and it is done.
Jesus.
So yeah, that's the reality I'm facing right now, but I'm still, it's a lot. It's a
Yeah,
lot to
and I mean,
follow.
and to tie and to tie this into other things, this is why people riot. This is why
Exactly.
protesting happens.
Yeah.
But this is why this happens, because you have laws that are unchallengeable by the system that you've agreed to operate under. And
Yeah.
what do you do?
Yeah. And I exposed so much illegal government conduct. That's the thing. Like, I brought it to the courts, like, hey, look, this is what you're supposed to be able to do. Look at what the government's doing. This is illegal. And they're just going to say, we're not even going to, I got silenced and everything. And it's just like, I do live in a rainbow colored, glasses world, and I refuse to leave that world. But this was kind of a shock. This was kind of like, okay, this might be for nothing, but not nothing. But I've had to accept different realities. It's just a lot to work through.
I mean, I would, to put a positive spin on it, I would say it's not for nothing, because I would say your personal growth is
I
certainly worth it.
know. I
Because,
know.
so
Right.
when you and I first met, we were on stage together, and you were far less talkative than you are right now, far less. And it is a pleasure to hear you right now, because you've changed, you're different. Like
Yeah.
there's your light is brighter, but your light is brighter. Like you understand what you're talking about. You are sorry, you always understand what you're talking about. You are unafraid to talk about it. So
You're
it's
right.
definitely a personal growth thing. So, I mean, obviously, in a long enough timeline, I'm sure a Met ceremony will reveal this. This part is preparing you for something that you don't know what it is yet, I'm
You're
assuming.
right. You're right.
Yeah,
Percent.
I mean, obviously, you grieve, you're in the grieving process, and I respect that. And I totally understand that, because I'm sort of pissed for you right now, because I didn't realize they could just say, no, we don't want to deal with that. Like, we just don't want to, like, that's just a slap in the face of they tell us that here's this system and it's fair, and that
Hmm.
anyone can be part of it, and you just have to follow the law. And then in practice, they're like, yeah, no, we just don't want
Yeah.
to do that, because we just don't feel like it. Jesus.
Yeah. I've been on this journey long enough where I'm not
Yeah.
letting it too much, but I
Yeah.
have, for my own well-being,
Oh, yeah.
I have retracted my power, my energy back to
Mm-hmm.
myself. Because now it's
Yep.
like, what do I do with my life? I've just been
Yep.
waiting for signs from the universe. I've spent all my money, and like the financial concerns are a big thing for me. I've spent
Okay.
thousands of dollars. I've
Yeah.
gone thousands of dollars into debt for this. Yes, I chose to do that, but it came in January where I'm like, I don't even know how I'm going to pay rent this month. And that's what I've been kind of, facing. So it's like, what have I done? Have I sacrificed my well-being and everything for this? And so I'm still going to write the petition. By the end of June is when it's due, or it's due like the first week of July, but I want to finish by the end of June. And then they have 60 days where they're going to say whether they're going to hear it or not. So we're going to know all this pretty soon. Again, it's, focusing on my well-being and
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
story, my identity. It's not that, oh, I'm just this freedom fighter that's sacrificing my whole life and well-being and all that for this and all my money and everything. Like, I'm trying to change that identity, because what I did was
Right.
incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
People don't have the courage to sit with no one telling them, no corporation, no employer, nothing, no one giving them money, nothing, to actually sit for hours and hours and hours and draft this and do this.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it is, yeah. So I'm just working on that right now, trying to figure out what do I do now with my
Okay.
life,
Okay.
and working on maybe being okay, like asking for, doing fundraising, things like that.
So I was going to ask that. Do you have like a Venmo or anything like that, or anything that
Yeah,
you could just, I'm not saying to ask for money, but if we could put up a link, and maybe someone who's interested could send some funds and send some energy in the form of cash there, like,
that's
are you okay with that?
I'm totally okay with that
Okay.
because it's not for me. It is actually for the
No.
people. And what I have
Yeah.
learned is that for me to sit down and not have to worry about finding a
Yeah.
job, which is that's
Right.
at the forefront of my mind right now,
Right.
when it should be on drafting this petition for United
Right.
States Supreme Court. This is our
Right.
last chance. This could change the world. And for my energy to be on that for the benefit of humanity and everything, it is important that I am not having to worry about how the heck am I going to pay rent this
Yeah.
month.
And I mean, and we even had to postpone this interview a couple of times, because you were worried about trying to pay rent. You're trying to do, I don't know, you were doing
Exactly.
gig work or something like that, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I also saw that you were in the running for a Maxim scholarship of some kind, a Maxim grant of some kind. So congratulations. As an avid reader of Maxim in the 90s, who first found out about absinthe from the Maxim magazine. Good work. You're in, I mean, Maxim's changed since I read it in the 90s, but
Probably, yeah.
good for you.
It was just
That
another
was fun. No, no.
journey to get out
I,
there. I'm like, why not?
I totally get it. That's it. Why not? But you wouldn't have done that 2 or 3 years ago, would you?
No,
Yeah,
God,
that's great.
no,
That's great. So
no.
personal growth, awesome. Yes, it cost you a lot, but the you couldn't
Yeah,
have got it any you couldn't have got it any other way. So wow.
no. So yeah, I'm not ashamed to ask for funding because this
Okay.
is important. It's not for
Okay.
me, it is for the people so that I can
Right.
have my energy focused on
Mm-hmm.
drafting this. This is a chance that humanity has. This
Mm-hmm.
chance might not come again. No chance like this to end the war on drugs has come before. And it's to have it go through legislation, all that, that's not going to happen. This is it. And so my energy needs to be on this draft, the most beautiful petition. And so, yes, I honestly don't even know how I'm going to pay rent come June 1st. So I am asking for the benefit of, the people so I can have my energy on this. I have a website. It's decrimourminds.org. I bought all the domains, so it's also decriminalizeourminds.org, decrimourminds.com, and decriminalizeourminds.com. But the lawsuits on there, I wrote it for the general public and I published it for people to read. So everything's on there. The complaint is on there, all my different
Yeah.
filings, the appeal is on there. And yeah, and there's just different stuff. There's a donation page. I have like a little blog where I've done a few things. But I did the website mainly to publish those things so that people can take these arguments. Like if there's someone who is arrested by the state, like it's already done in the federal courts, so I don't know how effective it'll be. But any criminal defense attorney, anyone who's been, arrested under the Controlled Substances Act or the state version of it, they are so more than welcome to copy and paste these arguments as their defense and say, you know what? No, your law is unconstitutional. That's why I did that. Anyone feel free, if you get arrested, copy and paste those arguments.
And this is a really great website. I'm looking at it right now. I've never actually seen the website for some reason. I just didn't look it up. If I didn't know what it was.
Thank
I don't know
you.
why I didn't. I know about you, but
Yeah,
I
I
don't know about the
designed
website.
all of it.
Yeah,
I
this is
created the
really great.
entire website.
It's straightforward. It's very simple. It's not super wordy. I mean, obviously the lawsuit is
Yeah,
the lawsuit is,
yeah,
but it's all sort of just one page, a couple of things on top. I can figure out how to navigate it really well. So good, excellent job at that. I mean,
thank
because
you.
it's really hard to parse this all down into like a
Yeah,
sort of a series of one page briefs essentially.
yeah.
So that's cool. I really appreciate that. That alone is an accomplishment. You've made like 10 of these things in the past couple of years. So cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, I've had to do it all by myself, designing the website,
Yeah.
everything has been me. I've tried
Yeah.
to get help and like no one wants to help. So I don't know, for whatever personal reasons, I find that it triggers people and either triggers their own self-worth or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it's had to be all me every step of the way.
Right. Well, let's get that message out and see how many other people are interested in this, because there has to be more. I mean, not that you're not a unique individual,
Yeah.
because you are, but there has to be people that would be in support of this and understand what you're going through and understand your concept and all that.
And I think that would be helpful prior, like in the next 60 days while I'm drafting this
Yeah.
petition,
Yeah.
because I think it could help. That's really our last resort, in order to try to get the Supreme Court to encourage them to not just ignore this.
Mm-hmm.
The more
Mm-hmm.
vocal this is, the more people know,
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, this is out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's someone who exposed all this government, unlawful conduct and corruption. And to let the Supreme Court know, we are watching. Whatever you decide, like, you brush this under the rug, we're going to know.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice, for more people to see this and know this and be vocal about it. I don't know how. I don't know,
We're
but
gonna
I think
we're gonna
that'll
figure it
help.
out. Well,
Yeah.
you've got one other person. You got Greg Lake I saw on there. So now you have a third to help post it out. So I'll make sure and do that. So
Well, he's got his own thing. He was
yeah.
just the first person that came along and actually read it and
Okay.
understood it and saw
Okay.
it. And I
Okay.
had just honor him for that. He's
Great.
doing a lot of other good work.
Yeah, I just saw he was working on the first someone was prosecuted for the first time for receiving ayahuasca. There was some
Yeah.
underhanded stuff there's more details, and I'll talk about that some other time. But yeah, he was I think it's in Kentucky, right?
Alabama, I
Somewhere,
believe.
Alabama.
Maybe,
Okay,
I don't,
somewhere
yeah.
over there, the South. I don't remember exactly
Yeah.
where. So,
So he's doing
um,
totally different stuff.
yes,
But he's a supporter. He's
great,
a energetic supporter and
great,
believer.
Great. We've been talking for 2 hours now. I'm about running out of energy just because this is awesome. And I'm assuming you are too, because I don't think you probably talk this much to people. So I want to thank you so much for talking to me, because this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing your energy and your time and all of this knowledge, because this has been just, I've been wanting to talk to you for ever since I met you a couple years ago. I was like, I want to know more about this, but I never could figure out how to. And now I know why, because you were doing really good work. You need to be on your own. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it means so much to me to have someone who actually understands and I can talk to, because it's very hard to talk to anybody about this, and you made it so easy. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything that I have not asked that you really want people to know about anything that you're doing or anything that you think about, at least anything at all?
The main thing that people can do, and that I just think is so important, is just so many people talk about other people and like worried about other people. Like you hear things like, oh, I don't want this person, I don't want people going around getting high, I don't want this or that. And that we need to hold ourselves just as accountable as we do the government and the pharmaceutical companies,
I like it.
because that's honestly none of your business. It's nobody's business what my state of mind is. By even throwing, I hear people throw out phrases like, we should be using, it's even plant medicines and plant medicine community, we should be using it responsibly. We should not be using it in this way. Oh, you're abusing the medicine. What that does is puts you in a position, you're defining what is responsible and then saying how someone else should have their human experience. And if it doesn't comply with whatever you think it should be, then you are casting shame onto them.
Yeah. Right.
That judgment onto them.
Right.
And there's just so much of that goes on. So I'm not for anything that has control over humans. It should be about, if anything about even like legal therapeutic, using plant medicines in therapy setting or whatever, a lot of it is based off of what I just see this everywhere. I'm very sensitive to it, how people are using it, not on how people are providing it. Yes, regulate providers, everything, but the actual human, how we have our human experience, and like it should be of no concern what someone else's state of mind is. If you don't want people going around getting high, please, I want people to listen to what they're actually saying. And if they're not sure if they even want drugs to be decriminalized, like to actually think it through. Like what you're saying is you don't want someone to experience a state of mind that you have decided they shouldn't experience. And they belong in a cage if they do experience that state of mind. That's nobody's, and I think it starts with ourselves, like when we realize how sacred our thoughts and our feelings are and how they're ours, they're nobody else's. When you start to honor yourself and feel that, then it becomes easier to honor others and to see what this really is about, the war on drugs and the criminalization and everything. So I would just, ask people to recognize the sacredness within themselves and how sacred their human experiences, their lifetime here on earth is, and to only worry about that and to feel that. And then that protection, I would imagine it would then grow into no one gets to touch this. No one gets to tell me what I get to think, what I get to feel, and when you feel that in you, that natural protectiveness, then that's what helps this grow and helps the belief around the lawsuit and not needing to go into other people's realms and human experiences and judge those. Worry about yourself and protect your own, and it's beautiful. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you. That was beautiful, very eloquent and beautiful. I really appreciate that. All right. So thank you very much, Jennifer. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Tyler. I hear people throw out phrases like, we should be using, even plant medicines and plant medicine community, we should be using it responsibly. We should not be using it in this way. Oh, you're abusing the medicine. What that does is puts you in a position. You're defining what is responsible, and then saying how someone else should have their human experience. And if it doesn't comply with whatever you think it should be, then you are casting shame onto
Yeah.
them, that judgment onto them.
Right.
And there's just so much of that that goes on. So I'm not for anything that has control over humans.